Okay, took a little time off. Welcomed new grandbaby to our family. Of course, we had some other family come in and do the oohs and ahs for it. So, yeah, that was nice. It was pretty fun. But let's get back to it. So, in this episode, we're going to build us a set of cabinet clamps that requires no welding whatsoever. Now, however, if you can, or you know somebody, or you do know how to weld, you can go ahead and make yourself these here, which are the 3/8 inch coupling with a pair of 3/8 inch nuts welded on each side, and that'll work just fine. I am not a welder. My daughter is, and it took her a little while to get these done. So in the meantime, I came up with a way to build these without any welding whatsoever. So with that said, let's get dirty. So for the most part, these are fairly easy to build. However, they are very hardware dependent and very time consuming. Just cutting one is not that bad, but if you're doing like me and you cut a set of four because you want four clamps, it takes a long time. So let's talk about what you're going to need. So you're going to need a box of 3/8 inch nuts. You're going to need a box of 3-inch, 3/8 inch bolts, and you're going to need a box of 3/4 inch, 3/8 inch bolts. You're also going to need these 4-inch straps and some hardwood. All right, you're also going to need some 3/8 inch threaded rod. These are 12-inch pieces here. You're going to need some 3/8 inch threaded inserts. And if you're going to use the threaded inserts that I recommend, I highly recommend you get some 17/32 metal drill bits. And the reason why you need the drill bits is because a 1/2 inch is just too small. And when you try and put in the threaded insert, it'll snap your wood. And the 9/16 is just a little too big. It just doesn't grip right. 17/32 nails it perfectly. So if you have a 17/32 drill bit, you're good to go. If I said metal, you don't need metal because it's just doing wood, then I apologize for that. And last but not least, I would recommend some 2x hardwood, some 1x hardwood, and grab yourself a can of this Rust-Oleum thick glaze. Now I use the glaze to go onto the surface that's going to be touching the wood. So when it's like this, and that way the glue won't stick to my cabinet clamp. Now, if you don't have the glaze, that's okay. You can just go ahead and use some wax paper to protect them, and that'll work just fine. All right, so let's start this assembly. Now, before we start the assembly, we need to prep the top and the bottom because they're going to go together just like so. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to cut ourselves some 42-inch pieces. And believe me, it'll work just great for your OCD because these holes will lay out just perfectly. So now we need to cut all of these holes. Now, the way I did it is I came in 1 inch and then I went every 4 inches on center all the way down. And then your last one will measure out at 1 inch. Now, for laying out the marks for where you want to drill the holes, I would recommend making the mark right on the edge of your material. So the first one, we come in 1 inch and we make our mark. Then we just make our mark every 4 inches after that. So it'd be 1, 5, 9, 13, 17, blah, 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 all the way down to 41. And then you'll have it all marked out. All right, and now here is why I recommend making the marks on the edge of your material. So we've got us a little table here. So we can come in and we can do our first hole at the 1 inch mark. Now I have this table set that when I line up this mark to the right to the edge of that table, I am exactly at 4 inches and I can drill my hole. And I can just keep going all the way down, line up my mark, edge of the table, boom, drill a hole, and just keep going. So this is the time-consuming part. So if you're cutting 4 of these, it's going to take a while. So we have all our holes cut for the top and the bottom. Now the next thing I did is I ran the top piece through the planer a couple times just to shave a little bit off, making it kind of a offset on the top and the bottom. And why is that important? So we're going to be putting these straps onto the top and the bottom. Now, if this was flush with each other and we put the straps on, it's going to cause a push out because they're even and one is just slightly offset from the other. I hope this is making sense. But we want to cut down the resistance as much as possible. So we got to remember on the top, this piece always goes on first, then this piece, and then we put it together. All right, so after we have it planed and it's offset from each other, the next thing I did is I went ahead and put 2 coats of this glaze onto the pieces that are going to be against the wood. That way, if there's any squeeze out, hopefully it won't stick to my clamp. And if it does, well, I'll figure something else out. So the next thing we got to do is we've got to cut 3/8" holes into all of these straps. Now, it's 8 straps per clamp. So if you're doing 4 clamps like me, that's 32 of these straps that I have to cut. Well, this particular one only comes with 30, so I had to buy an extra bag of these straps. Now, in order to put the holes into these straps, I made this little jig here because, holding these is not an option because once the drill bit catches, it's going to rip your finger off. So I just made it so it just can hold 3 straps at a time. I got it secured, and then I can just go ahead and drill my 3/8" hole through 3 at a time with a little WD-40, turn them around, and do the exact same thing. So it speeds up the process a little bit by allowing you to do 3 straps at one time, but again, still a very lengthy process. All right, so we've got our 32 straps cut. Now we have to make the pieces that are actually going to create the clamping. Now for that, I used hardwood. Okay, so I have some pieces of maple here. I have some 2x maple, and I have some 3/4 inch maple. Now my 3/4 inch stock is by 2, so it's 3/4 by 2, or a 1 by 2, sorry. And I cut them at 3 inches. So I have 2 pieces at 3 inches. All right, so now on the one that is going to create the actual clamping process, what I did is on the end, I made a center mark and I drilled a 3/8" hole about 1.25 inches into this stock right in the center. Then I cut a 3/4 inch hole all the way through. Now this is the piece that is going to hold your rod, okay? So when you're tightening your rod, this is the piece that's actually going to create the clamping process. Now on the second piece, again, 3 inches. So I wanted to make sure that when I clamped it down, that it was away from the scissor part or the straps. So I didn't want it hitting the straps and causing a problem on the wood. So I had to make sure I pushed it out far enough to keep it away from the wood when those straps clamp down. Now on this piece, again, 3 inches, all I did was just 1 3/8" hole, 1 inch up. So that will sit on the end, and this will create the clamp while this is compressing. So I cut the piece of 2x stock 1.25 inches by 1.5 inches. So that's going to create the tension when I start clamping it down using these threaded inserts. Now when drilling the holes for this piece that's going to create the tension, you're going to drill the holes all the way through on both sides. And that's where that 17/32 drill bit's going to come into play. All right, so on the piece that faces the wood, I have it centered, okay? So the center is going to be the piece that holds the threaded rod from the back side. So I have my threaded rod here, and I'm going to put the rod through this way. That way all the tension when I put it on is pushing on this, whereas if I put it this way and tension it, it's going to be pulling on this. So it just makes more sense that we tension pushing instead of pulling, so we're not trying to pull this threaded insert out of the wood. All right, so now we have to put 2 threaded rods on each side to hold this into place with the 3/4 inch bolts. So the hole is drilled all the way through, but I didn't center this one. I actually came a little off center. So if the center was here, I'm probably, what, a 1/4 inch off center on this, creating more tension forward than backward. All right, so we have our holes and we're ready to go. Now, these threaded inserts are not easy to install because no matter how you put them in and you manipulate and place, when you start tightening down, it usually goes crooked, right? So let's overcome that and head over to the drill press. Okay, with the help of the drill press, we're going to be able to put these in nice and straight. So we got to get it all set up. So I took a 3/8 inch bolt, I cut the top off, and then I tightened it into my drill press. Now I took a 3/8 inch nut and put it on the bolt. That way I can thread my insert on there and use the bolt to tighten it down. So now I know this is straight. All right, so now I want to set up my table, and I want my table to be about, what is that, maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch below where I want to put the threading in. So once I have that distance set, I can go ahead and tighten it down. Next, I'm going to use a piece of 2x sacrificial here. Now I'm going to adjust this wooden table that I made, and I want it to center up right on that hole when I push down or when I press it down into the wood. So now that I have that centered, I can set my clamps. All right, so it's all set up. Next thing I want to do is I want to lightly push it into the wood. Now again, I know it's straight, and then use my hand on the chuck and start tightening it down that way. All right, so now I know for a fact that this threaded insert is straight. Now I can just back it off. So I'm going to loosen the nut, and then once I got the nut backed off, I can just spin it right off of there and do the rest by hand. Okay, so there you go. Now you know that this threaded insert is straight and it's going to go in straight. Okay, so now you can kind of see what I mean by these are really easy to build. However, it's just all the time-consuming stuff that just takes forever. All right, so we're ready to assemble this thing. So we're going to take the top, put it on the bottom. Then we're going to grab all our 3-inch bolts, and we're going to start by putting all of the pieces onto the top. All right, so once we got those on, we can just go ahead and put a nut on the back side just to hold them into place. So we've got this action going. And then we're going to do the same for this side over here. All right, so we got all 4 of those on. Now let's assemble the bottom. All right, we've got all 8 of our pieces on here. Now we need to attach the back end. Now to do the back end, we're going to make sure that these are on the bottom and these come up over them. So we can put our bolt through, and we got to make sure we do the same thing on the back side where the top goes on first and then the bottom. And we're just going to put our nut on to hold it. All right. Let's flip it around. I'm going to go ahead and thread this part in. The assembly is a little different though. So we're going to make sure that the top goes on first, then the bottom. Then we're going to put one of these 3/4 inch jobbies in here. And it's easier if you don't have the threaded rod on this when you're trying to do it. Okay? So there we go. I got that piece on. Do the exact same here. All right, there we go. Now, when you're putting this piece here on, just till you get a little resistance. Don't buckle that down because you won't get any like scissor action here if you make it too tight. All right, so we can go ahead and thread our rod. And then we're going to take our 3/4 inch piece that we cut. And then to finish it off, put yourself a couple of nuts here at the end. If you're going to use a wrench to tighten it down, but that's cool. Just use the outside nut to tighten. Use the inside nut to loosen. And it'll work just perfectly. All right, so I got a clamp. Now I've got a cabinet clamp here that'll do about 3.5 inches worth of stock, which is pretty good. Now, adjustability. So obviously everything we put in our clamp is not going to be 3.5 inches. So what we want to do is we want to back out these 2 nuts at the end and then remove those bolts. Now we can just slide this to wherever we need it to be. And then once we got it lined up for where we need it to be, we can go ahead and push our bolts back through. And these, you know, I don't know if these are 100% necessary, but we're going to put them on just because. And there we go. So we can put whatever size stock we need to. Now, if you're working with smaller material, I did these at 4 inches. If I need to, I can take it back to the drill press and do every 2 inches. You know, you can adjust it to whatever your needs are. So there we go. Just clamp it down onto your wood, and you've got your 4-way pressure cabinet clamps. Okay, so a couple things here. The reason why I cut a 3/4 inch hole is I just took a bead of hot glue and basically put it right in the center of where that hole is, right onto the threaded rod. And the reason for that is because it just basically holds this piece into place. So every time you store it, this piece isn't falling off. So one other thing of note, you're going to notice that when you put this piece on for the tie rod, you'll see that it kind of pushes out because when you put these 3/8 inch threaded inserts in, you've got to stop right when it reaches the hole where it matches up with the hole where the threaded insert is going to go through. You're not going to be able to put them in all the way, and that's okay. But you're going to notice that if you tighten this down, even though you gave yourself that little space, it's still going to kind of push out a little bit. It's all right. It's no big deal. All we got to do is just back the screws out, or I'm sorry, back the nuts out until it's nice and even all the way around. Now you could also, if you wanted to, put some washers in there to compensate, to keep that pushed out exactly where you need it to be. And it's okay. That's perfectly fine. You can do that. So that was just a couple things that I wanted to mention before I ended this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new episodes as they become available. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments section. I will get to them as soon as I can. Until next time, keep it safe.